It's a privilege for me to moderate this last plenary session today. So my name is Gilles Demtos, and as Warren mentioned, I work for WANIFRA, which is the World Association of Newspapers and News Publishers. And for those who don't know WANIFRA, which is probably everybody unless you work at a newspaper, the aim of our organization is precisely to promote independent quality journalism, press freedom, and a sustainable business model for news organizations. So, as you can tell, the mission of our organization is very much related to some of the issues that Warren and the panelists in the previous session mentioned. So, the title of this session is the Gatekeeper Gone, the Changing Role of Traditional Media. And I think that, especially for those who attended the previous session, you will agree that this session will be the continuation of the previous one, which was supposed to focus on elections, but really broaden the topic and started to discuss the differences between social media and traditional mainstream media and their interaction. And I think that we kind of agreed that, and that was the conclusion of Warren, good journalism, we believe, will survive, and we don't know at this moment, it's hard to tell which organizations will carry this journalism, whether it will be news organizations that are mainstream today or used to be in the past years, or if it will be new organizations that are on social media or other platforms. Definitely, we know that in Asia there are a lot of new players in the news field, and so they are not mainstream yet, they are not traditional, but organizations like the Newslands in Taiwan, Hong Kong Citizen News, or FactWire, IDN Times in Indonesia. I mean, we are seeing a lot of new players that are carrying an ideal of real journalism. So, let's try to continue this conversation and to multiply the angles of covering this topic. Is the gatekeeper gone? We are wondering or studying this specific aspect of the news landscape, which is who controls the news and who decides what people read or discuss, and if the traditional media who used to play this role have lost part of their attributes, who is taking it over, or what is the new roles that traditional media can play. So to discuss these issues, I'd like to welcome the panelists of this new session. So I will invite them to join us on stage one by one. We have Zakir Hussain, the political editor of the Straits Times. Yeah, please come on stage. We also have Astrid Langer from the Neue Zürcher Zeitung that we heard this morning. So Astrid is editor at the foreign desk of this well-known newspaper in Switzerland. Joining us on this panel, we also have Heike Scholten, who's an entrepreneur, a social scientist, and a campaigner who advises organizations in political communication, analysis, and strategy development. Please welcome Heike. And finally, our last panelist and presenter for this session is Sutichai Yoon, which a lot of you just met in the previous session. He's the co-founder and group editor-in-chief of the Nation Multimedia Group in Thailand. And so to start this session, Sutichai, as you're the main presenter, I will invite you to take up the microphone again and maybe to share with us some ideas on this topic before we open the discussion with the other panelists and the floor. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to repeat myself. Is the gatekeeper gone? Very brief answer. Not really, but he is standing there quite lonely. Someone has taken the key away from the gate, and he doesn't know what to do. Because since everyone can be a reporter, everyone claims to be a gatekeeper. It is therefore a very significant challenge for traditional journalists to claim to still keep that role of a gatekeeper. Because in a way, the floodgates have been thrown open. Gates are more or less gone, in fact replaced by millions of unmarked doors, of confusing colors and signs. And if you think that media people call themselves watchdogs, the watchdogs also have disappeared. Some of them shot dead, others put into cages severely weakened by the lack of food, declining revenue. Besides, mass media have become fragmented. There is no such thing as mass media anymore in my mind. Media who can survive will have to cater to segments, and you have to be really good at what you report to draw enough audience, a size of audience that could sustain you. The challenge, therefore, is that media people will have to realize that they have become digital media practitioners. I do not draw a line between traditional media and social media. In fact, anyone or any news organization that still has a separate department of social media and traditional media are bound to fail, or in fact have already failed. But I don't think we can afford to despair. I think society still expects the professional media people to play a very important role, especially in the wake of the spread of disinformation, fake news, false news. There is even more need for professional reporters to separate facts from rumors, from fake news. But if you really look back, fake news is nothing really new. We give too much credit to Donald Trump by using that word and spreading it all over, making it a worldwide disease. But fake news, in fact, has always been with us. If you remember, some newspapers carry half a page every day corrections, meaning that they made mistakes the day before, and the newspaper's editors said, sorry, yesterday we misreported the story, we spelled the name of certain person wrong, some facts were wrong, and they made corrections. So there were, fake news has, I think, two categories. One is deliberate, manufactured news, and the other is misreporting, facts misinterpreted, and it has always been with us, at least the second category. But manufactured news, political parties have always manufactured their own news to please their own constituents. But because of the emergence of the changing politics in America, the word fake news was popularized by Trump when he actually said New York Times, CNN are fake news. In his definition, fake news is nothing more than news organization that reports things that he doesn't agree with, or that checks on what he said and try to find what's wrong with what he has said. But of course, with the rising populism around the world, we have seen this deliberate manufactured news that is biased or that has certain agenda is on the rise at a very scary level. What do people in traditional media like us do? I agree with what Ravi just said. In fact, I think that is the only solution, and that is we go back to the basics. We have to become the sources to go to when people are not sure about what they read in the social media. When they have questions about whether that is true or not, or whether that reflects what is happening, they will go to traditional media with credible brands. Branding, I think, is still the most important thing for traditional media. And branding must go along with credibility, adaptability, and the willingness to embrace social media. So we should stop calling professional media traditional media. Any traditional media that still call themselves traditional media will lose that touch of credibility sooner or later, because they must be part of the emerging social media scene. And no doubt, things are still uncertain. There's still a lot of discussions of how the next phase of media transformation will be like. As we discuss the impact of social media now, people are talking about machine learning. People are talking about artificial intelligence in the media operations. In fact, I'm sure some of you already know that artificial intelligence is being used to write stories for media now. Some sports stories are not written by human beings. They are written by a programmed AI that is doing the job. Sports story, weather reports. In fact, I personally was dreaming one night that AI can write a novel. All I need to do is I just put in a plot. I want the story to be romantic, and I put a few characters in there, and I say the story should start this way, it should continue that way, and it should end this way. And they feed in the information. AI can write a novel. This is not fantasy. This is already happening in other fields. Machine learning is going to change the media again. And it's not only the media. In fact, every profession is going to undergo a very major transformation. One day I met a scientist, a Japanese scientist, and I said, explain to me, how did the robot win that match with the Go chess game? How is it possible? The Japanese scientist told me, it's very simple. Machine learns. Well, I said, how? Well, if there's a chess game, in the history of this chess game, say, has been played 5,000 times, every move has been recorded by the winners, by the losers. We just feed in the information about how each move was made by both the winner and the losers. 5,000 games, 6,000 games, 10,000 games, and the machine learns. So when a human being sits opposite the machine, the human being has only his own limited experience. If he is 30 years old, he has played 2,000 games maybe, his experience is limited to 2,000 games. But this machine has 5,000 games of experience. When that person, the human being, makes a move, the machine knows exactly this move had been made before in the memory of the machine. So he knows that to win this move, he should move his chest in a certain way. Human being can get tired, can get sleepy, can get frustrated, get excited, anxious when he sits down for a game. But machine does not get excited, does not need coffee, does not need sleep, and it learns. That's why AI, artificial intelligence, is becoming a new factor. That's why I said that the traditional media will have to realize that the current situation, which we find very confusing, very uncertain, is just the beginning. New research and new experiment, R&D, is really happening to move the media ecosystem another step very soon. I don't think I can catch up with that despite my addiction to social media. I am 71, and I don't think I can fight the machine learning, but I will try to catch up with AI. And it's such a fascinating thing because it's going to change human behavior in a very significant way. That's why I believe, despite the uncertainty and realizing that things are changing again, we must come back to the very basic of what human can do better than the machine, and that is morality, humanity, compassion, and engagement. That's why I believe that the role of the media should not aim at being gatekeepers. We should aim at being the arbiter of moral standards, of transparency, of good governance, that machines will not be able to overtake human beings. The basic, manual, repetitive work we can forget because machines will sooner or later be able to do much better than human beings. But the stories behind it, the art of storytelling, the ability to engage human beings, emojis, the feelings, the smile, the angry face, the disappointment expression, that will remain with the human beings. That's why in addressing this issue, I am still confident that we can go side by side with technology and that we should be able to use technology to make sure that journalism, good journalism, will remain with us if we know how to reinvent ourselves and make ourselves relevant. That means training the new generation of journalists to become really up to it, really aware of the difference between human brains, human touch, and the machine side of things. I don't see the machine as a threat. I see it as a reinforcement of a good journalist trying to do a good story with the help of the machines. In fact, investigative reporting has been enhanced by the use of social media in a great way. In my personal experience, I can now reach a lot of sources, news sources, a lot of information that 10 years ago was impossible. Now I can get people in all fields immediately when I need information, when I need confirmation, when I need to check on what I suspect to be fake news. Now it's there. That's because of technology. For someone like me who started as a reporter using typewriter, when the fax machine came along, it was a revolution. And before iPhone, when I could get, I don't know whether any of you remember, but the first mobile phone was Big Bone, Ericsson, if you remember. It was about 2 kilograms, and you have to carry it everywhere. It's only after Steve Jobs came on stage and said, someone asked me whether it's possible to put the internet, the telephone, and the camera in one place. He said, that was a very interesting question. And today, here is the iPhone. I remember that moment. And that moment to me also changed everything. And once iPhone was available, the job of a professional journalist took a really big stride. And of course, when Facebook, Google came along with live applications, it meant that as a reporter, you can really reach for the sky and you can do all the things you have been dreaming about doing. It would have been impossible to talk to someone in Washington, to let him show me the picture of the demonstration in front of his house, to show my audience. It would have been impossible to have a live picture from the beautiful cliff in California where 2 young Thai students had an accident and the bodies were lying there for 36 days. And I could report on my mobile phone at my home, live, with live comments, live pictures to the audience that were waiting for it. TV could not do it. TV would not do it because it's not the format that TV does. Normally, TV, you have to have what they call OB, outdoor broadcasting. They need 30 people. They need to book time on the satellite before they can televise it. And it costs you a fortune to do just 5 minutes. For me, with Facebook Live, it was free. Only the internet charge. But I could get 200,000 people watching me all at the same time and giving me comments on what they thought were happening. So technology is perfect for us. But at the same time, all these big technological firms, Google, Facebook, are stealing money from us. So that's the flip side, which we're still trying to work out a way to cope with. 80% of the advertising revenue for traditional media have now gone to Facebook and Google. And they're not paying taxes to the Thai government. The money is sent directly to their accounts in San Francisco or Hong Kong somewhere, but not locally. So this is the danger, and this is also the opportunity. But I do believe that the big revolution is just beginning, and we cannot afford to lose heart and to say, oh, we are done, we are finished. And I would not put up that question of whether the gatekeeper is gone or not. The topic that I would have suggested would be, what would the gatekeeper do now? And I'm sure there are a lot of things that good professional journalists who can adapt to new technology can find new roles that make themselves relevant and important to society, such as a mirror, a really good, transparent, good mirror to show society what is happening, to report on every aspect of the change that is taking place, to remind society that good, solid reporting, honest reporting, independent journalism is still the most important part of their life. That social media may provide them with information which is in fact overflow of information, but if they really want real, reliable information, they still have to come to the journalist who by now would be a digital practitioner. He would not call himself a newspaperman or a TV journalist or even a social media blogger anymore. He will be covering the news, the story, with all the tools that are available now and all the tools that are being researched and will soon be coming. So that should empower the media professionals. That should not discourage the current crop of journalists to train the new generation of journalists who would not have the hang up of having unlearned things they have learned. I have found myself that it is easier to train new journalists with no media background than to train existing journalists to change their behavior to work on the new environment. But being Asians, we try to do both at the same time. We will encourage the older journalists to change, to adapt to the new environment, and to really create the new generation. We don't have much time. We need thousands of good young journalists. And it doesn't matter whether they study journalism or not. They can come from any discipline. They can be political scientists. They can be data scientists. They can be doctors. They can be engineers. They can become very good digital communicators if they don't call themselves journalists. At least the future technology will provide them with the tools that will be very, very useful, very important for enhancing the communications among various sectors in society. So I have great hope, and I'm sure that in the next 2 or 3 years we will see major changes again, and I'm sure that KAS will host another seminar that will take another step forward for the whole global scene to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khun Sukuchai. Well, I think you made an important point in clarifying a few terms, and I think that indeed it's more convenient for following on this conversation, instead of speaking of traditional media, to speak about professional media. And I think that in the same way, instead of speaking of fake news, we can speak about deliberate misinformation, and that allows us to distinguish it from what Trump and other politicians call fake news. Anyway, I think the angle you propose for this conversation is really interesting, and I would like to ask the other panelists to contribute as well from their own perspective on this question, which is definitely the media ecosystem has changed and has been profoundly modified by technology and by the emergence of new players, such as the technology companies, the social media network, the Google, etc. But there is something essential that professional media still can bring, and that is that can be empowered as well by technology instead of contradicted or oppressed. So I would like to ask the panelists from their own perspective, from their own field of experience, what they think on this question. And to start, maybe because out of our 3 panelists, two are from the media, but one is not a media practitioner, but you work with the media. So Heike, I would like to ask you, in your work of advising companies into their media communication, what traditional media, what role professional media plays, and that cannot be substituted by other channels.
Yeah, I think it's an important difference, traditional media and professional media. And when I listened to you today, I had the impression that the journalists and the media have a new enemy. Maybe it's a little bit provocative when I say this to you, but the new enemy are the social media. And I think it, we also have journalists who work in a professional way, but there are different styles to do professional journalism work. We have also the boulevard journalism, and we have unpaid journalism in Switzerland. There is 20 minutes. You can get it on the road every morning, and now it's the most important newspaper in Switzerland for the people. It's interesting, I think. But I think to the question, is the gatekeeper gone? I don't think so, that the gatekeeper is gone. We probably have more gatekeepers, and the new media and the digitalization allows not only journalists to be the gatekeeper, also allow other actors to play the role of a gatekeeper, and that is what we are. That is a little bit what we are doing in one of my companies. We create content to special issues, and for us it's very important that we do it in a way the citizens will understand what we are talking about. So maybe there is a new style of storytelling in our heads, because we need the attention of the people. But the most important thing is that we do it evidence-based. And so in a way, there are many gatekeepers, and for all of us, I think we were talking about the institutions in the morning, that they are very important to modern democracies. I think we have to take care of these institutions and to take care about what we are doing in this public sphere with all our informations we give to the people. And to the gatekeeper, it's interesting. We have heard a lot of fake news and stuff like this, and I don't know who of you are knowing Walter Lippmann. You know who it is? He was a guy who founded the gatekeeper theory, and he did it around about 100 years ago. And let me finish my first statement with a quotation of him. He said, "News and truth are not the same thing, and it must be clearly distinguished." And I think that's very important, that we do this all when we are creating content which we want to address to the citizens in a political way.
Okay.
If I can reply to that as a journalist, I don't think that social media is my enemy. I think it can be my friend. In my case, it's my friend. In other people's cases, it might be their new neighbor that they got to get to know and that they got to live with somehow. I think that social media is a challenge, but it's also a chance for journalists, because you can reach so many more people. Mariah was able this morning to live stream our session. I mean, there is nothing better for journalists than to reach more people, because that's what my job is, to reach people, to tell my side of the story. So I think it's a chance, but at the same time it's a challenge, because I think that from my perspective, there are basically two huge challenges to journalism right now. And I think one is the question of paywalls. should we have a paywall? As a medium-sized newspaper, it's very hard to come up with an answer for that. I mean, large English-speaking players like the Financial Times, like the Wall Street Journal, they have a hard paywall, what we call it. But for smaller businesses, it's a trade-off between advertising business and subscription business. So I think it's really hard to come up with an answer for that. And I'm very curious what the next couple of years are gonna show is the correct answer. And then secondly, I think as a journalist, we have to reinvent ourselves constantly. But I don't care if I get my news from someone through a podcast, through social media, through a newspaper, on a conference. But I think every journalist has to be willing, like you said in your presentation, to learn new things, which I think is also a good thing, because as a journalist, it's part of the deal to have a fresh mindset all the time. And maybe not all of us are going to survive, and maybe that's a good thing as well.
Okay, thank you. Zakaria, would you like to?
It was a little provocation. I wanted to remark, and I know that we all use these social media and that there are a lot of opportunities and also challenges to us.
If I wanted to add to both what Heidi and Astrid have said, I think social media has been a tremendous opportunity for us because amid concerns about declining circulation and people not getting the news the traditional way, I think social media's actually expanded our reach on some issues. There's certain opinion pieces or certain provocative topics that we cover that actually dominate the discussions on social media some days. And people who don't normally pick up the newspaper or surf onto our website actually access it through their friends' Facebook feeds, through Twitter accounts, and so on. And I think if I could take up the point on the gatekeeper role, I think the three things, even as we pride ourselves on accuracy and balance and insist on that in carrying out our journalism, I think maybe there are a couple of things that mainstream media outfits can do when there's so much misinformation out there. I think it's important for us to actually counter and actively combat false information or misreporting through our commentaries or through news stories. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, fake news tends to appear sporadically. These days, I think there's not a day that goes by without a report actually debunking fake news or talking about fake news of some sort elsewhere in the world. And I think it's also important for media outfits to educate and I think explain to people what the motivations are behind certain instances of fake news. For instance, I think earlier today we heard about how, in foreign policy, certain countries seek to influence public opinion in other places. I think because of our reach and because of our trusted status, I'd say, there's a role for larger media outlets to explain to readers just how these processes come about, how others are trying to influence readers and the public.
Well, I think that what you say goes back to the question of credibility and of value. Definitely, I think there's no doubt that we have to embrace new technologies, and we have to, like anyone, as a citizen or as a professional, wherever we work, and of course as a media professional. But the fact that this new channel of distribution of our content allows us to reach more people than ever, as Warren said in the previous session, goes at the same time with accompanied with the phenomenon that the credibility of our platform is lower than ever, and our revenues are lower than ever. So is it such a good thing in the end? And basically, what do we need? What could we do as media professionals or as citizens? And that opens the question to everyone in the room, to redefine the relationship of the professional media, of the mainstream media, with these social networks, so that we can mitigate the negative aspects of the relationship, loss of credibility and revenues for us, and enhance the positive aspects, which is reach more people and distribute our quality content to a wider audience.
Well, I feel like we as a society and basically as a global society, I really believe that we need a change of minds, and I don't know if that's going to happen, but I really regret the fact that news analysis and opinion pieces are regarded as a free good, as a commodity that you don't have to pay for. Who in this room pays in any sort for e-paper, for cable TV, or anyhow to receive news?
Okay, this might be a special room.
So it's not everyone, and which is also true when I ask I have many friends who don't subscribe to anything, but they feel like they are very well informed. And I mean, with information, there is no free lunch. You pay what you get for. And coming back to the image of a gatekeeper, I like to think of the gate that is being kept as basically my knowledge about the world, the information I receive. And as a keeper, that is, as the filter for that, I can either have a professional security guard who was trained for that, or I can hire the guy on the street who looks pretty big, or I can take the guy who I saw this morning who was claiming that he can keep my gate safe. But at the end of the day, it's a question of self-responsibility. Who do you trust your news with? And I have certain journalists that I trust, and I don't care if I read their articles or if I listen to their podcasts again, or if I follow them on Twitter, but I choose to pay for that news because I know it can't be for free. And I think the answer also has to imply some technological alterations, because it's so easy to get news for free. You just have to empty your cache or whatever. We all know the tricks. But I think at the end of the day, we just need a shift in our mindsets that news is something that we have to pay for. And only if we pay for that can we expect the newspapers to broaden their coverage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, and as you mentioned, it's important that the media professionals, first of all, change their own mindset. If you go back to what has been discussed today during the day on several sessions, we heard several journalists saying, well, we didn't do that well enough, and we should do that better. And I fully agree that, we can always improve, and there is a necessity, as we just said, for journalists to constantly, improve, adapt, change their mindset, etc. That's true. That's what we need to do, and we can always do it better. But I would say that we should also admit that actually that's what we try to do all the time. At least, that's what we feel is our mission, and that's what we should communicate. And I think to communicate that what we do has value, instead of saying, oh, well, everything goes wrong because we don't do it well enough. Yeah, well, it's important that in our communication we transmit this value that our journalism has. As you mentioned, for you see it as something that is very valuable and that needs to be kept by a bodyguard, and the media should be this bodyguard. I think that somehow part of our audience has lost this sense of value of the news, and it's our role to educate them and to remind them this value. Right?
There's a good example of Netflix coming to Thailand, and people are willing to pay. Netflix charge about 300 baht a month, and you can watch all kinds of movies, features. The question is, why do people pay for Netflix and not, say, really good news analysis, long-form journalism, really good video clips about things they want to know about? Perhaps that is, a good question that we, among ourselves, people in the news side, should look at. Netflix is affecting the local television programs, cinema halls, movie theaters also. People can watch at home, people can watch on the mobile phone. I always liken the social media to a public square in your hometown. The public square is where everybody comes together. In one corner is the entertainer, the singer. They put a hat there, waiting for donations. Another corner, there's a magician playing. Another corner, maybe someone drawing pictures. As a media man, you go to the square, you should offer something that people want to watch, to hear. So if you're really a good storyteller, you go to the middle of the square and you start telling stories that are interesting, that are exciting, that are true, that are useful, that can be used by the people. The crowd will start crowding around you. And if you really tell the stories consistently good quality, and you engage the people who come to you every day and listen to you and ask you questions, and you can answer questions, I would think sooner or later you can start charging. You can put up a door, you can put up a gate so that people will have to pay before they come in to listen to you. So in the end, it will be the quality of the material, of the content that we produce that would decide whether people are willing to pay or not. I think we will have to go back to the basic of whether what we produce is unique, they cannot find anywhere else, they can only come to you to get that kind of information, or the way you tell the story. And I'm sure somehow, sooner or later, you can start charging and they will be willing to pay. But if what you have to offer is available somewhere else, they can go to any other square in the city and they can get this guy to tell the same story, then of course they're not going to pay you. But more important is that you come to the square every day telling the story that is good, interesting, useful, and the crowd starting saying, hey, we can trust that guy.
And that's, sorry if because you were mentioning in your presentation in the beginning about how robots are going to take over the jobs of journalists. That's why I'm not worried about that. Because a robot can totally do my job when my job is to take stock data and put that into an article or soccer results or whatever. But a robot can't go to the White House and speak to 16 Trump advisors and get a story out of that. Not at least in the near future. And I think that's why journalists will always be important. And another development makes me optimistic. You were just pointing out Netflix. Netflix is now doing great documentaries. You get companies like Red Bull, T-Mobile set up newsrooms. So apparently some major companies see value in journalism. And I don't care, to be honest, if 30 years down the road I work for a newsroom that's owned by Netflix or by NZZ. I just want to do great journalism.
Yes, and you mentioned documentaries. That's another good example. For some reason, documentaries, long form, 1 hour, 1 full hour of documentary on nature, nicely done, well edited, is very popular and get very good ratings on mobile phone and on TV. So for serious journalists, there's still hope that if you can really do good documentaries, long-form stories, that people, and I mentioned baby boomers, these are the people who are now using social media and are very much addicted to it, and they are willing to pay, I'm sure, if we really produce good material, good content. Documentaries is one example which we discovered that the ratings of our TV station shot up because of documentaries, which we found surprising in the beginning, because usually documentaries are, nature documentaries. They're not action movies, they're not thrillers, they're not, exciting. But somehow people have time and the attention span to watch documentaries. That should be good news for journalists.
Quality content pays, and also the way of charging. I think you mentioned Netflix. You know that a former Spotify executive now has founded a company called Scroll, and they are trying to invent a new model for charging for content with a mix of content, just as Netflix offers a mix of content. And we see other, and for example, Facebook is also working with some publishers to allow publishers to offer subscriptions and to activate their paywall on the content they publish on Facebook. So there are ways that, we'll see, to charge for quality content. But the model, also this way of charging is important, because I think that, to go back to the Gatekeeper, the square you're describing used to be the newspaper, and now the square where you can charge for and ask people to pay is the social media, is this platform. So hopefully we'll see new ways to do that, and I trust that quality will prevail. I'd like to open the floor to some questions. Would anybody like to contribute to this discussion or ask a specific question to our panelists?
Yes, thanks a lot for this amazing panel. I'd like to ask Sudichai, you're talking about quality. I'd like to challenge you in that and say it's rather the relationship that you can build with your customer, with your, Gatekeeper has a lot to do with relationship. A gatekeeper will only let you through if they know who you are, what you want. And the other side also only will trust the gatekeeper if they know what you want, right? So quality, yes, it's very subjective. But I believe when you talk about going back to the basics, we're talking relationship, and we're talking taking it bird by bird and person by person. And then like the lady from NZZ said, she would follow someone over the channels, offline, online, wherever, because she trusts, because she knows it's good quality, because she knows the person, she knows the style. And I'd like to open that up to more of a discussion about relationship, be it in width or in the depth.
That's very true. Engagement, personal branding is very crucial on social media. The trust comes from your personal branding, also the branding of your organization. They go together. And that's why, as gatekeepers, they will trust only when they look at the gate and say, who is manning the gate? They say, familiar face. I like him, I like her. So I'm ready to pay. I think, and then, of course, once he or she pays, and when she goes in and sit down and watch, that content had better be good. Otherwise, it would be just once. They'll pay you once. So it has to be the brand quality and the engagement. They all go together, I think. That's why it's so challenging. And very few journalists, practicing journalists at the moment, are willing to adapt themselves to that kind of tough job. It's not easy. You used to just write a story, send it to the editor, you go home, and it gets published the next day. But now, no, you have to get the story, you have to go into social media to check the story, you write the story, or you have to do a video clip, and then you have to go into social media and watch the engagement and the comments, and then you respond. That's a lot of work to do. That's why I was saying that we need to train a new generation of journalists who will be digital natives and who would not mind working hard. Perhaps that's the most difficult part.
And being badly paid.
And being badly paid.
I think that's very important. It costs. And when I listen to you journalists, I know a lot of journalists in Switzerland who get out of their jobs because they want to make a journalism as you are talking about on this podium. And they told me, I can't do this because I have to be, I have no time. I can't do these work very serious. And so I can't talk to use all my relationships. I need to write the really good article. And so they went out of the journalism system. And so I think we have hard work before us to keep this good journalism, and we know that we have to invest and that we have to pay for it. And I don't know if we can find a way. For example, in Switzerland, there is a new example. It's called the Republik. I think you will know it. It's one of the journalists who says, "No, I don't. I really want to make a serious job, and I understand my role in a different way. And now I want to make a new project." And they started a crowdfunding action, and they collect a lot of money so that now they are able to create this new medium, the Republik. And their idea is that the audience are part of the game, and in a way they decide what they wanted to read, and then they produce a really professional journalism, and you have to pay for an article, but if you bought this article, you can spread it in your community. And for me, this is an interesting idea, that you have to pay one time for a good article, and then you can spread it into the community. Maybe it's a new way professional journalism can go. We will see. It's an experiment.
Yeah, I would like to ask, Zakir, do you share this experience as a journalist, that your job is harder, gets harder, and that it's difficult to find motivated journalists to...
That's right, yeah. So one of the things that we do is actually start looking further down the pipeline. We publish 2 editions a week, targeted at elementary school students and high school students. And very often we host groups of students kind of coming through the newsroom, getting some of them interested in journalism and so on. And some of them, many years later, come back and try and apply for a job, and they say, "It's okay, I know it's tough, it's not easy, but I think, I like the work, And maybe kind of using journalism more in education and the other way around as well. That might be a way to, easily reach a wider public and kind of educate them about the importance of journalism, because I think at the end of the day, these are the folks who will determine whether 10, 15 years down the road, you're going to have people willing to pay for your articles.
When I was a young editor, and when new reporters apply for a job, and I ask them, "Why do you want to work as a reporter?" Most of the answers would be, "I want to change the world," right? Now you can tell all these young people, now you can really change the world, because social media will provide you with that window of opportunity that wasn't available before. But I think it boils down to passion. It's very strange to say journalists have to be passionate about their job. Unlike artists have to have passion, right? But now I really think that journalists in this digital world would have to have enough passion to do the hard work to become good digital journalists. There was this guy in Bangkok who supports a lot of young startups. Young people come to him and say, "What is good about startups? Why do you think startups are so important?" He says, "People who work on startups will work like a buffalo, will be poorly paid, but we have a good future." Would you take that? Would you take up that job?
Well, but I definitely agree with your... Oh, yeah, okay.
Jack Ma, the Alibaba owner, told me, I interviewed him last month in Hangzhou. He said, for young entrepreneurs, for anyone who's trying to be successful, today will be very tough. Tomorrow is even tougher. But the day after tomorrow will be beautiful. But most people die the second day. And I think it's very true. For this effort to become really good digital journalists in the wake of this big perfect storm, I call it perfect storm because the storm comes from every direction. you need really to have the passion and really need to know that it's going to be tough. And it's going to get tougher once you really get into it. But the future is there. I think that is really what we should tell the young journalists.
Absolutely. Torben, you wanted to add something on this line?
Yeah. Hello? Yeah. Oh, yeah, it is. Sudichai, it's always funny when you're saying when I was a young journalist, because you're still very young in your mind, and it's always brilliant to see you on stage and sharing your positive ideas with us. But let me, as a German with my negative mindset, asking some more provocative question, that we come back to this gatekeeper functionality of the media. So, I worked as a journalist for many years, but I worked also as a political campaigner, a press spokesperson, so also this political communication was part of my CV. There are two things where I think the social, especially social media, not that much the internet, but especially social media, changed the game tremendously. One is when I was a young journalist, we were quite arrogant and said, "Hey, we know our readers best." But the truth is, we had no idea. No clue about our readers. If you look to Facebook now, what they're knowing about you, Mario Vogt told us today that American campaigners have up to 5,000 touch points with the points what they know about the voters, any voter in their constituency. 5,000 different habits and interests and so on. So that's a huge number. We, as journalists, had no idea about our readers. Yeah. So why should I advertise in the Nation, in the Straits Times, in the NZZ, or in any other of the One Ifra newspapers? Yeah. If I can target people, micro-target people via Facebook, Google as well, maybe. Twitter not so much, but if I can target them directly for a way cheaper price, way cheaper. So that's the first point. The other one, my friend Anurag is a member of parliament from India, from the BJP, and he made a very interesting statement just an hour ago next door. He said, the biggest newspaper in my constituency has about 100,000 circulation. But he has 1.5 million followers on Twitter. Why should he go to a journalist? He can talk to his voters directly. He doesn't need a journalist anymore. Yeah. So this is actually my question. Where are you still the gatekeepers? Maybe the three journalists on stage can answer this. Thank you.
Well, first of all, Torben, you don't have to buy a newspaper ad. You can buy airtime on our podcast at NZZ. You can buy online advertisement. We have all sorts of advertisement chances for you nowadays. So I think it's very important to offer the advertising clients alternatives, that's for sure. And I think one reason that you should go into a must-pay media outlet is that on social media, mostly people who are obviously not willing to pay for anything. So if you are targeting a luxury client segment, for instance, you might be better off in going into a newspaper. Having said that, I can see how you don't need the journalists anymore because you can reach your constituents right away, but maybe they need the newspaper because they want to hear if there is anything that you've done in the past that's of their concern. So I think that's why it's important that you get a newspaper subscription, but it's especially important for voters to get a different way of information than just social media.
Zakir and
I think if I can say that, I think you can reach 1.5 million people directly or so on, but I think, and they can talk back to you. But I think among voters, there's still some skepticism. I think they do still want some form of intermediary or someone to interpret what that person stands for, who that person is about for them. And I think the media still plays that role. I think it may no longer, sometimes it can't play that role in long-form print, but I think people do give greater weight to what social media posts a media outfit puts out?
Well, I said that if journalists do not reinvent themselves, they will die. They will have no right to claim themselves to be gatekeepers. Number one, they have to reinvent themselves because of the changes in technology, in consumer behavior. So, number one, journalists will have to reinvent themselves to remain gatekeepers. Secondly, gatekeepers should still be there. Professional gatekeepers should still be there because they could be objective, they could be professional, they can check on claims made by politicians. He might have 1-2 million followers, but everything he says, the followers will have questions. Where do those followers go to check whether what he claims are true or not? So we need the gatekeepers, but the gatekeepers have to be able to provide credibility and be able to tell the other side of the story so that there's no conflict between a politician having 1.2 million followers and a journalist having 20,000 followers. Doesn't matter whether the numbers of politicians is much higher than a journalist's followers, but the role is different. The role of a journalist, if he's a good gatekeeper, will be very important to make sure that politics is transparent, the competition is fair, the other side of the story is also available to his followers. I don't think his followers would only listen to him. His followers, or any politician's followers on Twitter, would also be curious about, hey, what is the other side of the same story? And journalists, if they are good, and if they keep changing, adapting to the new environment, using social media tools effectively, then they will be not only important, but indispensable.
Heike, what would be your answer to Torben?
Yeah, I think we had a discussion last night about it, and I think we need these professional gatekeepers in our communication society because two keywords are very important to me, and the one is orientation, and the second is validation. And I think that's very important work professional journalists are doing to us. And in my role as a campaigner, the media, the traditional media, was always very important because they are writing this orientation, and therefore they are in a way also not only gatekeepers, but also they frame the issues, and it's a part of this orientation job they do every day. And I think yes, we need it. It's important, and I hope that it will be important in the future. The gatekeeper isn't dead. No.
Well, thank you, Heike. I think that on this positive note, we can close this session as we run a bit late, or continue the conversation later, unless somebody else wants to add a last contribution to this issue. Yeah, okay.
Hi, I'm
one
Jackie
last question then. Yeah, sorry.
a journalist from the Philippines. I think we all agree that in order for the gatekeepers to survive we need to sustain or find a way to grow our audience. This is a question for Suthechai. How do you engage the millennials, the old-timers in your Facebook Live?
Well, I thought I was lost. I thought I was only going to engage the old people. Then one day I discovered on Facebook Live that the young students, secondary school students, were watching. How did I know? Because the names were there. And then he started saying, I am 16 years old, and I have been watching you. And one day I was in a restaurant, and the young guy walked up to me with his mother and said, oh, Kun Suthechai, I watch you. What? You? You watch me? And the mother said, yes, I confirm. In our house, 3 generations watch you. Wow, that made my day, right? The grandparents, the parents, and the kids. So Now I have to find a way of being able to engage 3 generations. So I have trouble every day, what topic. But I do not bother about that. I just do a story that I think is current, is interesting, and that I can give deep background to the story. I can give opinions so that anyone watching me can get an idea of what happens. And I do not dumb down my topics. I talk about Trump, the serious stuff about him being investigated by the former FBI director and all the stories about his tax returns and all this. And North Korea, every time there's a breaking story, I go into Facebook Live and say, hi, this is breaking news. Watch now, because the North Korea just fired another bomb. This time it's supposed to be nuclear, and the 6th time. And then I see the number goes up. The number of people coming in goes up. And then I'm sure that young people, once they get interested in news, and this is what makes me very happy, that if the young Thais get interested in current affairs, I have hope for democracy. I have hope for the country's future. And that's why I'm not worried now of trying to make money from that yet. But my very big satisfaction is that I can now engage the young people on issues that once were thought to be too boring for them. Once they thought old people talking about politics is boring. They need young entertainers to dumb down political stories, to make jokes about things, and then they would just watch these entertainers, celebrities. No. If we really do it consistently and tell the story in an interesting way, I think that we can engage the young people again. Baby boomers, young millennials can be the same audience, in the same audience, if we know how to handle them.
Well, thank you very much, Suchai, and I would like to thank again all our panelists. Please give them a round of applause. And I'm really glad that with your help, we reached this very optimistic conclusion, which is that mainstream media, professional media, still has a lot to bring to society, and with passion, we will find a way to get paid for it. So that's a great way to conclude.